Welcome to Build. Hello, everybody. Oh yeah. So much clapping. It's so nice. It's so warm and refreshing. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. What happens when a Brooklyn couple on the verge of marriage decide they should sleep with other people before getting hitched? How does that affect the relationship of their friends? This is the subject of the new film Permission, featuring our next guest, Rebecca Hall, who also produces, and co-stars François Arnaud, Morgan Spector, David Joseph Craig, and writer-director Brian Crano. Before we bring them out to talk about the film, I want to remind our guests at home they can leave a question for our guests via the Submit a Question button right next to the video you're watching. Right now, let's take a look at the trailer for Permission.
First loves and still together. Never been with anybody else your entire lives. It's so crazy.
Our sex life is really, really great.
He's quick. Compared to what? The two of you are so perfect and constant and inevitable and boring. Aren't you curious? You must be.
Sorry about Ria's last night, you know.
It's not like I feel like I'm missing out or whatever.
Am I holding you back?
I know how much you love me.
Can you just say what you mean?
I think that you should sleep with other women.
I don't think it's gonna work.
Oh, why not?
I could be free tonight.
That's great.
Human nature, thousands of cautionary tales preceding you.
You smell like my father.
That's not us.
You want to be with Reese forever?
No, I would like to be with Reese for as long as we make each other happy.
You wanna hold him?
So you have secrets. Tell me, what is it?
It's nothing bad. Did you do everything?
A lot of things.
Is he better?
It was different.
Different better?
Different.
You're still attracted to Will, right?
Yes.
Sex is sex, but that's what you agreed to. Just be careful.
You just think that you meet the one. But there can't just be one.
Everybody, please welcome for Permission, Rebecca Hall, François Arnaud, Morgan Spector, David Joseph Craig, and writer-director Brian Crano. Hey guys, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the film, which is kind of an anti-romantic comedy in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think that was the idea.
It's a straight-up romantic comedy premise right off the top, and it spirals. I don't want to give anything away, but it spirals. So let's talk about where you came up with this idea.
A lot of my friends, all as we were just turning 30, were in very serious relationships, but were like godless children of divorce. And so it was like, what happens when you're like staring, you know, like statistics people, and you're like, this relationship is likely to fail. Science says so. Now what? I love my partner. How do I deal with it? And so it's about that. It's about questioning your life and being honest and stuff like that. And yeah, so it gets weird.
It gets weird, and I'm curious. I think where it goes is fairly brave for any kind of film. So without giving that away, because a lot of people haven't seen it, I'm wondering if you ever hesitated to take it in the direction that it goes in, or worried about how that would land.
No.
Oh, so brave, so confident, Brian.
No, I mean, you know, people have made a softer version of that kind of story, or more overtly comic version of the story, and that's just not my taste per se. So I wanted to do something that was funny and that would engage you, but that also where you would have to leave the theater and have like a really awkward conversation with your husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, guy you met in the lobby, whatever.
Can you talk about the Brooklyn that you've set this in? It is a kind of romantic version of the Brooklyn that a lot of us live in, to be honest, because I live in these neighborhoods.
Oh yeah?
And I was
We're
like,
neighbors.
these apartments are really fucking nice, guys.
Yeah.
But that's the way, sort of a romantic version of it felt like you were playing up the romantic comedy version of these places.
To me, like, to do that, to heighten the world around the story, makes the emotional impact of the story even more punchy, because it is like there is no overt problem between these two people. They're in a good relationship. So it's not as if, there's abuse or they're mean or whatever. It's just like, no, we're questioning our lives. So to set the table as this kind of beautiful, elevated version of Brooklyn is like a real fun. Also, I just think it's a beautiful place to be and fall in love. But yeah, no, it was for those reasons. It was to sort of like bring up the element of suspense. Like, why would you leave this guy who's built you a townhouse? Why would you think about it?
It's a very polished, beautiful look with lots of, as you can see in the poster, but it also features prominently in the film a lot of neons and it's extremely colorful.
Yeah.
Rebecca, this is your third time working with Brian, is it true?
Yeah.
Right? And you signed on as...
We've done short films and then we've done 2 short films, technically.
Well, this is a fourth.
So it's this 4th, yeah.
And you jumped on as producer. This is the first film that you've produced, right?
Yeah.
So how did that happen?
Well, I didn't really wake up and think, I'm going to be a producer. Where's the script? It just, this sort of happened very easily because, Brian's one of my oldest friends and I've always read the stuff that he's worked on. And in many ways, the idea, I was along for a lot of the thought process of this film. And a lot of it came out of conversations we had about, that there is a lack of representation on screen often of a woman who has sexual agency but isn't psychotic and who is actually the nice girl and has everything and is great, but she has question marks and she's, and it's about someone who's giving themselves permission to go on a quest to work out who they actually are. That's what it's really about. It's not actually really about, open relationships or non-monogamy. It's about growth, really.
But the potential for sort of growing out of the comfort that you've been living in for quite some time.
Yeah, because I think there's we talked a lot about this. I think there's enormous pressures on women still to, it sounds a bit Jane Austen-y, but still to be sort of perfect in every way and be married at a certain point and be in a perfect relationship and have children at a certain point.
You hypocrite!
Yeah, no, I totally am. But I think, I think it takes a lot for a woman to question those things and think about leaving them if they are essentially good. Because they worry that it's going to be a failure. And the truth is, it's not a failure. Relationships end.
Your character has this stereotype of like kind of a perfect guy.
Exactly.
He's
He
works with his
he's
hands.
He's great. He's giving you everything. What is it? What does it take for you to still question that?
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian, when did it come into effect to have a gay couple sort of alongside of it and kind of not mirroring what was happening for them, but being absolutely affected by the kind of just the philosophical decision that this other couple made?
Right. Well, David is my husband.
Guys?
And so I had always, and we'd been talking about having kids, and that's...
So wait, can I ask, did the writing of this movie affect your relationship at all in the same way that it affects the couple in the movie?
You want to take that?
No comment.
No,
Come on, guys, let's get personal in front of this audience of strangers. It's gonna be great.
I definitely gave him pages, and he was like, "What?" You know what I mean? Like, do we need to talk? No, but I think that
that should kind of be the case for everything that you're writing when you give it to someone really close to you.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think a lot through that kind of work. Like, I process my feelings through writing about it, so it's not unusual. But definitely in a movie about non-monogamy, giving those pages to your husband is a risky endeavor. But I would say that, like, we were talking about having a kid and how that works. And as a gay couple, it's difficult, and there's acquisition issues around that, and it's a real life. So I wanted to pair that real life big picture item with the other, monogamy, non-monogamy, are we getting married, and have those two things be able to interact off each other in the story. So yeah, it was there from the beginning.
David, jump in here. What was it like working on this with him or getting the pages?
Critically, when I first read the original script, I sort of removed myself from the element just to like read a very beautiful script on page. And I think what was wonderful and what Brian does so well, that I enjoy so well, and what made me be is the fact that he takes a genre and and really characterizes the characters rather than playing into the plot lines. And so I was able to really relate to every single character in a really natural way. And then it was actually quite interesting when we got to putting it all together, because then we merged family into the whole situation, because we've been all friends for a very, very long time. And, you know, I'm now playing opposite one of our...
He's my husband. if anyone was-
We gave each other permission to enjoy each other, so...
Hence.
Boy, did we.
It's a weird day at work.
Morgan, what I like about your character is that the entire premise of the film is precipitated based off of your sort of lackadaisical throwing it out there, and then you have the biggest problem with it throughout the whole film. So what was it like playing that character? Sort of tightening up in the middle of the movie, almost.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting about our couple is that actually we're more mature romantically. Like, we've both been down a lot more roads than the Dan and Rebecca's couple. And so I think there's this sense of both a little bit looking at their relationship like your relationship's quite immature and you don't know it, but then also knowing I've tried this other thing, or I've at least seen people who have tried it, and it has complexities that you're not aware of. And I think that's where a lot of his skepticism comes from. I mean, just the problem that they're dealing with is whether or not to have a child. I mean, it's really a bigger problem. It's a bigger issue, and it's a more sort of substantive issue than like who you're fucking. You know what I mean? A little bit. Sorry, is that not? Is this a? Okay,
yeah.
great.
Yeah. Oh, please, everybody, dive in. Just start cursing.
Oh, great.
I always thought this was a curse-free zone.
Oh no.
Things are gonna go.
Oh, this is for the internet, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The internet has swears.
But your character is also kind of he feels like he's kind of a protector at a certain point. That he threw this out there and regrets it, and he kind of wants to protect their situation almost vicariously because he's having trouble protecting his own.
Yeah, I think that's a totally valid reading. I mean, I think he also knows his friend. He Reese loves Dan's character, and maybe he knows he's not up to
Poor Dan's character, sorry.
I know. He handles it quite well, I think.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things I wanted to capture too. Is like friends within a friendship, within a close friendship, you can be brutal to each other, and you really force these kind of hard truths on your friends, and the only way you can get away with it is that it comes without kind of malice. You know what I mean? So that actually gives you a huge runway for drama, because they can really beat the shit out of each other, but you know where it's coming from. So it doesn't. I wanted to make the movie in a way where there wasn't a villain. You know what I mean? Like, there's no antagonist in this picture. It's just people trying to get what they want, and those things are in opposition. So,
what was it like? I mean, it sounds like you guys have all been friends for a long time. You sort of wrote these parts for each other. What was the shooting like? Was it just like a bunch of friends getting together and making a movie?
No. I mean, you're still making a movie. Like, you're at work. Right. You got we have days to make and lots of pages to shoot, and so you're still. It's still.
I was the producer. Everyone stopped being my friend.
Yeah.
I'm no one's husband.
Yeah. You didn't marry anybody. That's ridiculous. How'd you get on this job?
But sorry, you are the other guy in the film. Were you like the other guy on set as well?
Guys,
yeah, I guess one of the other. But the kind of just.
Yeah, I think that for the big tragedy for my character is that he thinks it's his movie. He thinks he's the hero of the story of this rom-com, and then, unbeknownst to him, the object of his affection is engaged, and he's just not kept in the loop. He's completely kept in the dark. So I have to disagree with you that you're a nice girl. That you played the nice girl.
No, I completely agree. There is an element of this that is worth pointing out. Is like there are films or storylines. I certainly did one earlier this year, Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman, that deals with the idea of polyamory or open or however you want to call it, ethically. It's like ethical non-monogamy. Mm-hmm. And actually, these two characters, they are not naturally those people. They don't know what they're doing. They don't set up the ground rules. They go about it completely unethically, and that's deliberate. It's a hot mess.
They're deceiving the people that they're
it's not the appropriate way to do this. It's the appropriate way to make a mess, and that's I think what we're showing.
What is the appropriate way to do this? I've had this
Ground rules and
conversation.
Communication.
Yeah, but I've had this conversation before, and it's kind of like, oh, if we wanted to do that, how would you do it? And I'm like, to be honest, well, I'll just be honest. I've always been like, oh, if I needed to do that, I would probably just get a prostitute because I don't feel like seducing anybody or like going through a relationship with someone in order to just have a brief affair. That sounds absolutely horrible to establish a connection with somebody. I don't know how these characters do it.
Do your thing.
I'm not going to. I'm not. No.
You should.
You should.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you ever
also-
considered that.
No, but there are also there are. I mean, there's.
So sorry, guys.
No, but there are ways. Obviously, there are many ways.
out a lot
there
about
are
you.
many ways of.
I have never gone to a prostitute. I'm just saying that right now.
Whatever.
There's
If you did,
probably
it's
an
all
app
cool.
for
It's
that.
fine. There's no reason to judge that. But like,
Mom, if you do watch this, I'm just.
I think we should just talk about prostitution.
she might have some things to tell you. No, it's.
She's like, your father too. We talk about it.
That's right. No, but there are definitely a lot of different forms of that kind of relationship, of like a multi-person relationship, and some of them would be about accommodating a momentary fling, and some of them would be about having multiple love relationships at the same time, where everybody's aware of it and on board. And I actually, people raise children in those kinds of contexts. Like it's
Sounds
a very
exhausting, to be honest.
I think it sounds like a lot of work, but it's just monogamous heterosexual relationships are a lot of work too, and everybody, I mean. Some of them, but it's just sort of what, not ours is what I meant. Yeah. No, but
You do have a child on the way.
but
Roll
it's
it
about
back, roll it
deciding which kind of work you want to do. I think it's that's all it really is.
Yeah. Rebecca, were you going to say something a second ago? So the mic.
Yeah, no, I was going to say something. I was just going to say that actually I think there are lessons to be learned that one doesn't suspect. So, I have thought about this a lot, sort of thinking about people who make these choices in two movies now, and the lessons to be learned are that communication is imperative, and that's not what people assume about people who engage in these sorts of relationships. They assume that it must involve a lot of deceit or hurt or pain, and the whole point is to avoid that by talking and talking and talking and talking. And I'm sorry, but I think plenty of straight vanilla people in very straightforward relationships could learn from that.
Well, and a lot of the crisis in the movie comes from characters assuming what their partner wants rather than talking about it, and trying to play a role of some, idealized version of what it means to be a good boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, instead of just going like, what do you actually need what do you need? Like, how can I fit into what your needs are, and vice versa? And I think that that's sort of where
David and Morgan have a great scene near the end of the film that is exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. I'm curious. I mean, since we have two couples on the stage, and this is did shooting this film and reading the script sort of naturally? Sorry, other guy.
Pleasure.
No, Francois, you can answer this too. I'm sure you've had relationships before.
He hasn't.
I mean, when you're shooting a movie like this, does it naturally bleed into your personal, private conversations with each other? It seems like it'd be hard not to. It's just a thing that everybody kind of feels
in topic
and discusses.
or in terms of what?
Well, you're done shooting this, and the entire day is a talking about polyamory or infidelity and what each other needs and how they need it. I can't imagine that it's not on your mind when you're having dinner that night. Or
to be honest, given that both sets of couples here are married, so we've made a kind of huge leap of faith, I think it would be really worrying if we hadn't had those conversations already.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think doing this film was necessarily going to be the moment that we suddenly worked out there were huge holes that we hadn't covered.
And I also think sort of vis-a-vis reading, just our conversation happened out of just reading his script. Oh, how do you think this would work? And we'd subtly be like, I think they would probably do this.
I think he wants to tell him to do that. I think he wants to tell him. I think it's a ruse. It's a sly ruse.
I love the scene, and I hate to give away anything, but the scene where Dan Stevens can't really come up with what he wants from a woman sexually. And I think that's a really articulate predicament for the sort of average, I think, hetero male at this point, which is kind of, I would never say that hetero men are repressed in any way.
I would.
Okay, there you go. But I think there's a fear of establishing
My
what
friends,
you want.
not you guys. No, I mean, I've had that conversation with a lot of my friends, and there is a sort of, again, we fit into these sort of societal roles of either through culture in terms of movies or culture in terms of porn or whatever, that men are strong and know what they want and all that kind of shit. And it's not the case. And I think especially something like this where he has, an aberrant kind of trait that he would like to work out with someone else, that's a really difficult thing to lay on someone date number 2. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's kind of an interesting. That's what that scene is about for me. Is about going like, wait a second. Sometimes, you know, like people's sexuality is so messy. Like everybody's sexuality is so messy. Like somebody in here is into feet. You know what I mean? Somebody in here is into like weird stuff.
A lot of people
like it just
in
is
here.
true. I mean,
That's a thing.
And I'm not being judgmental about it. So like, I wanted to pick something that was very visual for the movie that he's into. But I think it's I want to.
So he is into that.
I think so. On some level.
My interpretation was that he was kind of confused and looking for something to do because he was in this moment where he was being asked, and he was like,
both can be true, though, right?
Yeah.
So I think that, like, to me, that scene's about somebody who's suppressed his sexuality for a really, really long time, and then gets the first instance where somebody's like, do whatever, just be yourself, and then that thing happens, and it's very surprising.
Can you talk about casting Dan Stevens? How you got him in the film? He's wonderful all the time.
Yeah, I don't want to like stress the point of us all being besties, but I went to college with him, and I'm godmom to his kids, so he lives down the road from all of us, so there was that too. But he's brilliant.
Yeah, he's a brilliant. I mean, he was exactly the right guy to be so nice and brave enough as an actor to be trampled by the stronger women in the film, and like to be like every scene he is brilliant in getting kicked around by Gina or by Rebecca, and just taking it in a way that is so beautiful to me.
Isn't he also eventually kind of trampled by his own sort of entitlement and and how much he's willing to take for granted?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think like that's the root of all of our problems, right? Is your own sense of like what you're due. And so he had this idea, he did it. It comes back in his face, and he can't, take it in some degree. So yeah, I think it's a beautiful performance that he does. I'm really, really proud of it.
I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience in just a second. Rebecca, you mentioned you are pregnant. Congratulations. Morgan, you are the father. Congratulations. This is crazy, but I have to ask. I saw you in Animal last year.
You did?
Yes.
Yeah,
it was an amazing.
Funny that we got pregnant soon after.
Well, that's kind of my question, guys. It's a wild play.
This is a play about postpartum psychosis. If anyone was interested.
It was an amazing performance.
Thank you.
Yeah. But what was that like, sort of in the midst of that, getting pregnant? Or are you able to just detach completely?
After, actually. Just after. Yeah.
Like, I've already experienced that. I'll be good.
I feel like we sort of workshopped the worst case scenario. So, it was good.
Yeah.
Nothing gets you feeling like you're going to start a family, like postpartum. No, I don't. No, it's very strange.
Let's get a question from the audience. What do we have here?
Hi.
Hi.
So as someone who lives in New York, I'm actually extremely pessimistic about monogamy in relationships. So this movie is really entertaining because it touches on these subjects. So your personal opinion from each one of you, do you think humanity will graduate at some point away from monogamy and become open-minded enough to not have a high divorce rate and so on?
No. And I'll tell you why. I think that it is such a difficult ask, person to person, and that there was this great radio piece a while ago about the math of finding like the right person for you to be with, and like they break it down like there's no men, and there's you choose men, and then you like these people are too old and these people are too young, and it turns out there's like 6 people in all of New York that you could pair with, right? By the time you're done. So it's like you have to find them, B, they have to like you. C, you both have to be on the same page on that kind of level. I just think it's such a huge, huge ask emotionally. Like, and our whole society is structured where if you have an affair outside of your relationship, it's terrible. You did a bad thing. And so, and look, in my relationship, that would be the case too. Like, I'm not a varsity player at this sport. So, it's just, no, I would like to be evolved enough to not give a shit. I'm too Italian. It just doesn't work like that. But the point, but that's my feeling is like, it's just so fucking hard to do the basics to then do like, we're Olympic level at this kind of emotional, not at the sexual realm, just the emotional competency of that is so difficult.
Yeah, I think people often forget that polygamy, or what we talk about, is sort of ownership and ownership of a certain amount of intimacy that you have with another person. And as soon as that gets shared, you feel like you're losing a piece of that. And I don't even know if it's like a societal thing at all sometimes. Relationships naturally evolve to like the next step.
Right.
And it's almost, I hate to say ownership, it sounds like the wrong word, but like you own living together, you own engagement, you own marriage, you own a child.
Right.
And then all of a sudden something kind of breaks off.
Right. I mean, I want to be really, sorry, one second. I just want to be really clear. Like,
They're having their own thing about ownership right now.
Good. I don't want to be like, I don't want to be down on not, my answer to that is not that monogamous relationships are the way to go. Like, I certainly don't think that. I just think that to the question, in a broad societal way, like to expect like in 30 years we'll be like in that world I just think is optimistic.
Next question.
I hope we'll be more accepting of it, though.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Because right now it's still very, people who there's an
Yeah,
expectation that it can never work, and it does work.
The
actually.
YouTube comments on the trailer are pretty extraordinary.
Morgan wants to say
in their
something.
conservatism.
I do want to just respond to that question a little bit, because I do actually think that a couple things are happening which might make things change, not in 30 years, but in like 100 years. One of them is that I think the generation below us is really experimenting with gender roles in a different way, and completely I think losing the gender roles that make these concepts of ownership and possession so important and so sort of visceral. Like, I'm with you, I couldn't deal with it either. But I think maybe some of that stuff comes from these sort of socially constructed notions that are actually losing their power. Yeah. The other thing is, if we're living longer and longer and longer, if we're gonna live to be 150, and you're gonna meet somebody when you're 25, are you gonna stay married with them that whole time? Maybe
Are you?
Maybe you'll have multiple.
What are you gonna do?
I mean, maybe you will. Maybe that's like the new definition of
live to
romance.
40.
But maybe there becomes, maybe we start to have greater acceptance.
I don't know how many exciting affairs you can have between 90 and 150.
I mean, it depends
Speak
on
for
how
yourself,
well things
François.
are working.
Virtual reality will be a thing at that point.
100%.
Next question.
Hi. So my family, my culture, the arranged marriage thing is still a thing, and they still talk about how that still works for them. Families stay together longer. Do you think having that option or more choices makes it harder to stay together for certain people, or just the fact that you can be with more than one person makes it easier?
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. For me, which is really all I can answer for, that I'm sure choice makes things more difficult. I'm sure, because there's that element of second guessing. Whereas, like, if the two of us were stuck on an island and you kind of go like, well, that's it, we're here.
This isn't an island?
No, I mean, like, exclusively, just like the two of them. Anyway, so I think that could be really. That could really make things a lot simpler in the fact that you're forced to communicate. There isn't a sort of easier way out, maybe. I don't know. That's, again, sort of above my intelligence pay grade or whatever.
Yeah, he just made a movie. Guys.
Yeah, I'm just a dumb guy with a film.
He can't answer to arranged marriage.
Well, what you're talking about, you said, like, these are godless children of divorce. Yeah. There's a cultural context surrounding the choices that we make.
Certainly.
Right? And so, like, in one way, if you're not, like, you feel supported or to some extent have your choices limited or constrained or inspired by that cultural context. And if you're coming out of a sort of, relatively, I don't know, atheistic kind of cultural void, as like most Americans, many Americans grow up in, it's quite different than growing up like in a cultural context where there's support for, operating honorably within that tradition. So
That's a better answer. I like that answer.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi. What was the best advice that you were given before you guys were married?
There's this performance artist named Justin Vivian Bond, and I was asking her about if we should do it. And V said, who do you want making your medical decisions? And before decisions, I said, David. And then it was like, that's it. So it was just it was the advice was, you know already, you know the answer. You just have to, have somebody you respect ask you a pointed question, maybe.
Solid pause, guys.
Joining in on this one.
Sorry, give us a minute.
Do you guys want to call in a lifeline or whatever?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a very good question. I feel it was.
I know we were so sort of determined and like plowing forward.
I can't. I think probably the best advice I can think of about marriage, and I don't know who told me at first or whether it's just sort of received wisdom, is that it's not a pact and it's a done deal and then you throw away, you sign the thing and then it's in a drawer and then you don't ever have to think about it again. It's a daily evolution and it's a daily negotiation and a discussion, and it never stops evolving.
It's a thing you do, not a thing that...
It's a thing you do. It's not something you did. Yeah.
And I think piggybacking off of that, something that we recognized too was, for us, was making the day of marriage a day. Like that, it wasn't a defining, it wasn't like, that day wasn't just a defining moment. It was an unbelievable day, but it was just another day. And then the next day is just as exciting, and then the next day is just as exciting, and don't put all the pressure on the act of getting married. Just
But you had one of the best weddings that has ever.
It was pretty good.
It was arranged spontaneously within,
a half hour.
Half hour. Yeah.
Wait, tell us about the wedding before I let us go. We can't leave the audience.
Okay,
hanging
so
on
we
that.
have dogs, and we really wanted to bring our dogs to the wedding, and we couldn't take them to the courthouse.
Wait. Can François tell the story for us?
The wedding.
So
sorry, man.
We were gonna have Rebecca marry us, like on the Brooklyn Bridge with our dogs or something, and then
I got my certificate thing that you get online, so that you can.
Universalist or Unitarian.
Yeah, and it was all going to be fine, and then we read the small print when I got the email that said, in New York State, you have to wait 3 months before we were officially official, so you can't do it.
Yeah. So then we were like all furious in the city.
Very upsetting.
And then we went out to some Christmas party, and she called us and said, "Oh, I'm here, and there's a guy who can do it at a bar." Called Clandestinos on the Lower East Side. And we said, "Can we bring the dogs?" And she said, "After midnight." And then and then we just
the bartender.
Yeah, well, and then then we were there about 45 minutes later, and we did it spontaneously.
Well, and the best thing is she was with a huge amount of exuberant cast members of theater who all went to 7-Eleven and made a Twinkie cake and
got candles.
Hanukkah candles and bows on the wall.
That
It was
sounds really
really cool.
it was all at candlelight.
Fully decorated the bar with like bodega candles and those votives.
It was very New York. It was like so New York. If you put it in a film, you'd be like, "This is bullshit. I don't buy it." It was like that.
But then the next day, you guys just got to have a kind of normal day after
Woke up,
you were married.
Woke
Noodles.
up, went and met them, and had ramen.
Yeah. It's pretty much like any other
So
day.
wonderful. François, were you there?
In spirit.
Terrific question. No, I was not invited.
Oh, you.
Yeah, we didn't know you yet.
But it sounds nice, right?
That's true. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Let's do it again.
Okay. I'm so sorry. I actually do have to wrap it up. How can people see Permission?
It's out February 9th, and you can pre-order on iTunes today and all relevant other platforms of your choice, I think. Right? Is that right?
Yep.
All right. Great.
Sounds good to me. Guys, give them a round of applause for Permission.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure.